Okay.
So I am here with X Ho Yin, the author of the book Minimum Safe Distance, which is described on Kirkus Reviews as a thoughtful, inventive SF fable. How are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me today. The release date of our Minimum Safe Distance was a year ago to the date on October 17th, 2022.
Yeah, it was a year ago. Yep.
What was the inspiration behind writing the book?
Oh man, that's a weighted question. All debut novels, anyone will tell you, are really autobiographical. And when I started writing Minimum Safe Distance, this was back in 2005, which was right around the time I was beginning to um, break my complex PTSD. And the way I've described it in my vlog is that my my creative side had begun to feel like it was breaking out of prison, and it insisted on trying to represent things, creatively. And so this idea came into my mind for the story itself, but really it's a vehicle for, describing my experience of life and my thoughts about the world. And so that's that's kind of my answer to that what inspired me question. It was one of those huge, I have to write this kind of things.
Man, so it's aliens, humans, they meet at a crossroad for humankind. I feel like, that's a very like, timely book, because we see like, people like, talking about like, the government has been hiding the existence of aliens, people like Stephen Greer, like, as whistleblowers, how does
See, what you will find in MSD is my thoughts on the whole alien thing, which is once you have a certain technology level, um, you can turn yourselves into creatures who are capable of living in space. And so our simple extrapolations of like people on spaceships is still very old school. It's really very, it's just an extrapolation of all of human history's experience, right? But we transform ourselves. Even today, we transform ourselves. We've been wearing eyeglasses for, who knows how many decades, and we don't even think twice about it, right? And now just look at all the other things. We have prosthetic limbs. We have all these things that are happening. We carry around electronics with us all the time. They're built into our lives, and the way we think and the way we interact with the world. We're already indistinct. We're already unrecognizable compared to people from 100 years ago. We're completely different because of technology, right? Well, what was realized decades ago was that at some point computers were going to get to the point where they could at least equal our ability to think. We're seeing some sort of hints of that right now. The AIs, they're still very much, they're generative, they're riffing off of all the info they've scraped out of humanity. They're not sentient, self-aware things. They're not capable of real thinking the way we are, but they give you that feeling, they give you that hint. Now, I mean, it's the Turing test, right? Once you get to the point where you can't even tell the difference between them, then it makes our lives a lot harder. Now, that doesn't mean they're thinking. It just means we can't tell the difference. It's the same thing with any person. You look at another person, you don't know if they're a thinking person or not. You really don't know, right? But the point is, at some point, computing will get past the threshold where they become thinking entities, right? And then on the other side of the equation, nanotechnology will get to the point where we have full mastery over matter. Okay, and when you merge those two things, that is the point at which it becomes possible to transform our species into something transbiological and to just live in space. And so the creatures, these what you call aliens in Minimum Safe Distance, there are really a bunch of different alien species that have passed along this capability or at the same, come to it at the same time, that kind of thing. And they themselves, they're physical manifestations of the world, their technological, transbiological, and selves live in space. There's no spaceships, there's none of that stuff. it's incredibly difficult to travel from star to star in a spaceship, but once a species reaches the point I just described, you don't need to go to another star. You can just eat asteroids and live off solar energy, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? And so I'm one of these people who find it very difficult to believe that aliens are visiting us, because if they have the ability to cross the stars, then they would have the ability to do what I just described, right? There's no need for them to come here. And my joke is, there's no need for them to come here other than to watch the spectacle, to check out our Nazca lines, the lines that are you can only see from high altitude down in Peru or Chile or wherever it is. I joke that the only reason for them to come here is for artistic observation purposes, but it wouldn't be in spaceships. It wouldn't be. They would just be things out there that you wouldn't even be able to see. They'd be, like in my book, they're hiding on the south pole of the moon, just watching. And that's the sort of thing that I think would really happen.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think like a lot of the fans are pleased with the fact that you described, like, these advanced technologies in the 22nd century. Why
But
should people read the book?
yeah, that's the thing. It's not about the technology. That's the most important thing. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
The best science fiction is not about the technology or the science. That's just the vehicle for the story. The real story in my book, my debut book from last year, is about personhood and transformation. And what I do with these self-mades, the creatures that we're talking about, and with my human characters, is I explore, what does it really mean to be a thinking creature? What does it really mean? What is required to be a thinking person? And what does it mean to be a person? Because I come from a background where my definition of personhood is the widest possible thing. I'm incapable of thinking in terms of race or nationality or anything like that, And so this was my way of basically taking a hammer and smashing all ideas of what it means to be a human and what it means to be a person. The idea, there's a lot of people who think in terms of like, if you change from being a human, then you're not a person anymore, or something along those lines. And that's even aside from people who can't even get past the ideas of race. So it's really about personhood and transformation.
Definitely. Man, minimum safe distance sounds like it would be a really incredible movie. Like, is that something like you're hoping to do in the future, possibly?
Well, if someone wants to make a movie out of it, I'm not going to argue with them. I think it could make a very cool movie. It would be very difficult to do right, because it isn't about dumb action scenes. It isn't about spaceships and space fighting. It's about these deep person things, And so it's a very cerebral book. I spend a lot of time inside the minds of these characters as all of these dramatic things are happening in the world. So it would be very challenging to make it into a movie, but I think if somebody did it right, it could be a very, very cool movie.
I
And by
think
the
so.
way, just let me interject. See, this is the book we're talking about, folks. Minimum safe distance. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where,
And then,
where can people buy it?
anywhere. If you go to my website, which I assume you'll have a link to, the books tab can get you anywhere. And then this October, I also
What is your website?
it's xhoyenauthor.com. So that's XHOYEN author.com. Oh, and can I just say something?
Of course.
It's very important. I think it's possible people will just look at me and see white guy, but I'm half Lithuanian, East Prussian, really, and a quarter Cuban and a quarter Chinese, right? That's partly why I cannot think in terms of race. I'm a mix. I'm a human from planet Earth. You know what I mean? Uh, but some people might look at me, and at the very first thing they might see is this guy's chosen this pen name X Ho Yen, and it's cultural appropriation. He's trying to seem like a Chinese guy or something. The fact is, my grandfather was Chinese, and when he emigrated from China to Cuba, the immigration officials heard his name and they translated into Ho Yen, but they spelled it differently. So my pen name X Ho Yen is my family name, just one generation back, two generations back. is not cultural appropriation. I feel the need to say that.
Yeah, like I have a lot of conversations about cultural appropriation on this channel and stuff and everything. I never even considered that a thought in my mind. Like, I think like, the book that you've written is wonderful. Do you have any other books that you've written or like, that you plan on releasing?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was trying to force my way in. I've just released in October my new one, Custodians of the Future, and it's completely different than MSD. It's a mystery it's a mystery romp chase book, and it all takes place in a single day. It's centered around a group of what I call janitor squad, and they go to this wastewater plant in Stockholm, and they discover something that causes them all manner of trouble. And so it chases from there. There's a chase. It's a mystery to solve. But I took a lot of influences from pop culture, especially the Blues Brothers. People who read this will see the Blues Brothers in this, and but I also dropped like over 100 little pop culture references for fun. It's not required to know them, but if you know them, you get a little kick out of it. But it's a completely different book. I'm trying to not always be the same kind of thing. I don't like I don't want to just write the same thing in every one of my books. That's why it's going to be difficult for me to write a series, because for me, it's not about you know writing more of the same world or more of the same people. It's
Is that
about
it?
exploring
Because like
ideas.
you worry about losing like fans, the people who like the first book, might not like the second book, and like
That's right.
but you may gain new fans and stuff. Is that something like that goes through your
Yeah,
mind?
it is a problem. It's a challenge. My audience simply is not the kind of audience that's looking for space opera, action, adventure, alien invasions, things like that, time travel. They're not going to find that in my books, and I know that. So it's difficult to find an audience because the all of the systems are set up to find those audiences because those are huge audiences already. But it's a little bit of a self-fulfilling situation, right? If all the categories are categories like that, then how do people who want to branch out find other things? It's difficult. Um, but I've decided that I'm in this for the long haul, and I'm not writing to trends or anything, and I'm writing stuff that I feel is, it has some meat to it. And whether you like the meat or not, that's your thing. But it has some meat to it, so I think it'll have longevity. You know what I mean?
Most
So that's
definitely.
my plan, is to just I'm going to write for myself. I'm going to write from the heart, and just see how that goes.
Man, I enjoyed speaking with you, X Ho Yin, the author of Minimum Safe Distance and Custodians of the Future. Thank you so much for joining me. I love to have you on again. Like next time out in Denver, we'll have to do a real podcast
Sure,
and
yeah.
read your books in between and stuff. So I really appreciate you
Awesome. I'm working on the next one now. We'll see how it goes.
for sure.
Thanks, Ryan.